Okay, so yesterday we were just looking at the Mishnah Brura um, in Orach Chaim to talk where they talk about this concept of doing some kind of lottery system um, in giving out portions to the family. So and he writes as follows. We had seen last time that you're not supposed to do this thing who like you're giving out pieces of pie, right? So if you're giving them out on Shabbos, you can make it for your family members. You can say, okay, whoever guesses a number between 1 and 10 will get the first piece. And he says you're only allowed to do that if the portions are equal, and you're doing it in order to not create jealousy, because one person will say, how come he got first? So you want to try and calm everyone down, and you say, okay, I don't know who to give the piece to first, so I'll just say whoever guesses a number between 1 and 10, whoever gets closer will get the first piece. But you're not supposed to do it with other people that are not your family members. He says, because then it's not a question of giving people that which already belongs to you, but you're talking about exchanging items of value that where you're dividing money up. And the reason is on Shabbos you're not supposed to do that is because people will come to want to weigh and measure things, since everyone wants an equal piece. And so this is a takana that the rabbis made on Shabbos, lest you come to weigh and measure, because weighing and measuring on Shabbos is not permitted. Aval, but then he writes, Aval litein mana gedola keneged mana ketanu lahatil goral alehem afilu b'nei beito uvachol asr mishum kuvya. But to make a lottery where who's going to get the big piece, or who's going to get the piece with the extra whipped cream, or on the top of it, so whoever can guess the number, or whoever can create a lottery, and whoever will draw straws or whatever it is, that you're not supposed to do, because that's akin to playing dice. And you're not supposed to do that even during the weekday. And so this type of idea about gambling is even problematic, according to this first opinion, with your own family members, right? But you don't want, and the reason why it's usher, according to this first opinion, is that even though there's no gezel involved, because it's not like you're dividing up assets between two people, but as the Ateres Tzvi commentary says, afilu bivnei beso mishum da'asi lemisrach, because you may get them into the habit of gambling and of playing these kinds of gambling games, and that's not something you want your children to get used to doing. The Yesh Omrim that, and some say no, the imbanav uvnei beso mutter lahatil goral afilu almana gedola keneged mana ketana mipnei she'ein makpidin. And some say that no, that it's not a problem, because it's not their money anyway, and everyone recognizes that it's only a game, and it's not really a form of gambling, and so therefore it's okay according to the second opinion. And then the Rama says that you're not allowed to draw lots on Shabbos, even through a non-Jew. And so the question is, why not? So first of all, the two opinions that we saw in the Shulchan Aruch, whether you're allowed to draw lots, like to draw straws among your family members, the first opinion says that you're getting them in the habit of gambling. The second opinion says that no, gambling in the first place is only an Isser D'Rabbanan of Gezel, and therefore to make a takana to prevent people from coming to gamble is not something that the rabbis instituted. And of course, that, like we saw in the Imrei Yaakov, that the generally accepted custom is to allow people to gamble, provided that it's not their main occupation. Like, so that's why people halachically are permitted to go to places where gambling is done, right? To Vegas or Atlantic City. Halachically, it's permitted as long as it's not your primary method of earning income. And then, of course, is it considered to be like the language that we saw in Imrei Yaakov? We'll go back there in just a minute, but you can clearly see that the Rav Shulchan Aruch was concerned about this first opinion in the Shulchan Aruch, because he said that even though if you gamble with a fellow Jew, this opinion says that there's no problem of gambling, but nonetheless, and there's no problem of gezel, but nonetheless, there's still a prohibition, because you don't want people, like he says, as is codified in Orach Chaim. And so he's referring to this idea that even though there's no problem of gezel, there still may be a potential problem of causing people to get into the habit of doing this kind of stuff. Sorry. Finally got him. Okay. All right. So now, so the Mishnah Berurah says, going on the Ramah's statement that you're not allowed to draw lots on Shabbos, he's not talking about the lots that the Mechaber was talking about, but he's talking about a different kind of lottery drawing. He says, Hainu imhu lechalik eze davar, va'asr afilu b'makom da'asi li'insuye. He says that if you're talking about dividing things up on Shabbos, the Ramah seems to be more machmir than the Mechaber, and he says that when it comes to dividing something up between a group of people and you want to draw lots, even though there was an opinion in the Mechaber that it's okay among family members, he says, I guess the Ramah is more machmir, and he says you're never supposed to do a lottery on Shabbos. Even if the whole reason for doing the lottery is to prevent strife, is to prevent people coming to argue with each other, nonetheless, you're not supposed to do a lottery. Aval lahatil gorol mi omar kaddish o mi shiyala latorah shari. He says, but what you are allowed to do is to take a lottery as far as whose turn it is to say kaddish or whose turn it is to get the aliyah. Okay, that you are allowed to do in a shul. Daha hayu mithisin b'Shabbos b'mikdash mishochet mizorek. And the basis for that is that when it comes to doing a mitzvah, we have proof from the Gemara itself that they used to do a lottery among the Kohanim, the Beis HaMikdash, to determine whose turn is it to do this job, whose turn is it to shech, whose turn is it to do the sprinkling of the blood. Everyone was, and they did it. The Gemara actually in Maseches Yoma describes a process where the Kohanim would stick out their fingers, right, and they would go around in a circle, like eeny, meeny, miny, mo, and so that's a form of lottery taking, and therefore that's permitted in a situation where you want to determine who's going to do a mitzvah. Va'ayin b'nezer hakodesh shehevi b'shem Shavuos Yaakov. Shemash Mosheinu Mutarak Lahatil Gorel Mitoch HaSefer Kenavu. He says it seems that you're only allowed to draw lots or do a lottery system if you're using some kind of book. Aval Lahatil Gorel Ayadei Pitkaot Shenichtavu Me'erev Shabbos Shem Chol Echad Olav Umatilim Bekalfi Umitzian Pitka Mishiyal LeSefer Torah Asur. But to take pieces of paper where each person's name is on a piece of paper, put it in a hat or in a lottery bowl, and then pull out pieces of paper, that you're not supposed to do. That you're not supposed to do on Shabbos. And it's not really clear why you're not supposed to do that on Shabbos. But apparently that's like too much of an organized activity. And I guess that's the reason why poskim are machmir in that situation on doing that on Shabbos. Let me just see. Things. Okay. No, there's nothing. All right. So I think what we're seeing here, if I'm understanding it correctly, I'm not sure if I am, but if I'm understanding it correctly, there are additional restrictions not only to do a lottery because it's Shabbos, but also to do any kind of raffle or lottery. It seems that is going to be prohibited because it teaches people how to gamble, or it gets people in the habit of gambling. And this creates a question in general, like how far are we going to take this? How far are we going to take this issue? Um, um, the Imrei Yaakov had said that technically, when you're misachek bekuvia, when you gamble, we are more lenient, and we say that gambling with others, even with fellow Jews, is not considered to be a form of rabbinic theft unless it's your only occupation. But he says, "Avolamaisa shomer nafsho yirchak mizeh." He says, but a person who is careful should guard his soul from engaging in this kind of activity. So it's almost like an extra or meta halachic consideration that it's not healthy for your neshama to be gambling. Is essentially what the caution is. On Shabbos, there may be additional restrictions, but based on that, it seems like in general we seem to be more lenient in this regard, because many religious institutions hold raffles all the time. They ask people to buy a raffle ticket, and then they raffle it off. And then, first prize is a trip to Israel, second prize, whatever. And so there seems to be a general sense of leniency because this is a method for fundraising. And so let me just show you. We're going to go further in the Imrei Yaakov. And we'll talk a little bit. We'll look at some statements that he makes in the Likutim over here. Let me go back up. Amisachakim bekuvia. Here, take a look at this in the bottom. He says, "L'sachek b'mischak hashachmat." Does anyone know what shachmat is? Can anyone guess what that is?
Chess.
Chess. That's correct, Barry. Shachmat, from the word checkmate. Chess is an ancient game. It's part of the ancient world. He says, "Can you play chess on Shabbos?" Pligi bo haposkim. The poskim debate whether you can play chess on Shabbos. And uvamakom shenagu lahakel ein limchos biyadam. And in places where they are lenient, you should not protest. Aval ra'ui lihitrachek mizeh, but it's worthwhile to distance oneself from playing games in general. I can only tell you that my wife and I and my kids, we play a lot of games on long Shabbos days. We do bananagrams, we do rummy cub, in addition to all of the other things. When there's time during the day, we engage in these activities. But when you look at some of the classical authorities, they sort of discourage this kind of activity. The cost of Birkei Yosef, the afilu b'chol shomer nafsho yirchak mimenu, and the Birkei Yosef writes that even during the week, a person wishes to guard his soul, should distance himself from these activities. V'hagam sha hakneses hagdola kosav tegedolei Yisrael nitfelu bo, even though the Sefer Knesset Hagdola, which is a very early post-medieval Sefer, says that he can testify that even great rabbis were known to play chess, were known to be chess players. Hanach l'gdolei Yisrael devadai ma'asehem l'shem shamayim. But that's not necessarily proof that it's appropriate for everybody. Because if you know that a Gadol b'Yisrael engaged in an activity that perhaps is questionable, perhaps they had a very good reason for doing it. The efshir dahavi cholim b'choli hashchora because they may have suffered from depression. Umishum refuah la'asuche daitaihu bebadoe gulamahadar al talmudayu v'chayotze kav. And perhaps the only reason why they engaged in playing chess is to be able to get their mind off their depression and allow them to pull themselves out of it so that they could eventually return back to their studies. Ad kan devarav. That's a direct quote from this sefer Birkei Yosef, which is, I think, 17th or 18th century. So he says, "U'v'sefer Hakadosh Reishis Chachma Kasav Zelishono," and then in the other, and there's a very holy sefer called Reishis Chachma, and he writes as follows: "V'yeshe hitiru la'atzma mine haschok bekuviot." Some people do permit themselves to play games involving dice, she'omrim shehu davar hamechaded hasechel, because they argue that it is something that will help them sharpen their minds. Okay, sharpens their minds. V'ra'iti legalot ta'utam, but I choose rather to expose their error. L'man lo yitzchakmu v'ta'anat yitzram v'chulei, because I don't want them to become so wise using the argument of their Yetzer Hara. Basically, he felt that it was wrong to play games and to play games involving dice and so forth. And certainly to play games that involve money, you should not do because of the problem of gezel, the problem of theft. Okay. Now, hagralot liminehem shemagrilim chayfetz mesuyam osikum ma'ot b'hagrala danu bo ha'achronim. And finally, he just writes, any kind of lottery or raffle, where they're raffling off a certain specific prize, or they're raffling off a certain, a lottery. So this is something that's widespread, as we know, in Israel. And is it permissible for a person to engage in a lottery? This is something that has been deliberated by the latter authorities, and Rav Stern is not prepared at this point to enter into this discussion any further. So, I'll share with you the screen where there's a discussion about this issue. It's a lengthy discussion in the Sefer Pischei Choshen. Just see where it is. Okay. He says, in this particular sefer, they're discussing the whole issue of the term asmachta. Asmachta means a type of transaction or a type of pledge that a person makes that is not legally binding. And it's a very complicated discussion, but essentially the Gemara says that there are certain times when a person makes an exaggerated pledge or exaggerated promise, and he cannot be held to it legally because it was clear from the context that he didn't mean to be taken seriously. That's what asmachta generally means. And then, so in the course of this discussion, he talks about the concept of gambling. He says that Virak mitam ze amrinan de mesachek b'kuvya lav asmachta v'chein b'shnayim shehimru zeh keneged zeh. When a person is gambling, or if two people are making a wager with each other, lo havi asmachta mishum dekeven sha'asheni mitchayev gam ken kenegdo gomar umakni hamit umitchayev. Because when two people enter into a wager where both of them have equal amounts to lose, that is to be taken seriously from a halachic basis, and therefore it's a legally binding commitment. What happens if they make a wager where one person says, if I lose, I'll pay $10, and the other person says, if I lose, I'll pay $100? He says it would seem to me that there's no difference, but that still is legally binding. And then he goes on. Let's see here. He says, "Mikaven shematzui kayom shemagrilim chayfetz mesuyam asukim ma'ot bahagrala." He says nowadays it's quite common for people to do a raffle or a lottery. L'chora yesh bazeh mishum asmachta avi divrei hachronim bazeh. So let me tell you what the latter day poskim have to say about this. Va'agav kach gam shar dinim shematzati bi'inyan goral. And let me tell you some other things that pertain to doing the lottery. V'nira shehagrala letovat tzedakah o mosad ein bazeh mishum asmachta. He says, it would seem to me that there's no problem of asmachta, that it's not meant to be, it was never meant to be a serious commitment when a person pays money. Is there, in other words, essentially he's asking, is there a problem of gezel when you take people's money for a raffle or a lottery? He says, va'afal pi sheyesh konim hagrala l'shem hagrala, even though people, when they put down their $100 to buy a raffle ticket, they're hopeful that they're going to win the lottery. And when they don't, there's a general disappointment. But nonetheless, their primary objective is to give it tzedakah, because they're not relying on the fact that they're going to win. V'achronim danu b'din goral imhu kinyan o ena ela birur v'chol zeh eno ela b'goral b'chalukat shutvim aval mashanog lasud hagrala al chayfetz o al sikum ma'ot shemi sheyalem misparo b'goral yizkeh eno inyan lazeh. He says, let's not confuse an issue of dividing up assets using a lottery system versus a mass lottery where everyone puts down money and then whoever wins with the winning number is the winner. Those are two different things. So clearly in a situation of a lottery ticket, that's not what the Shulchan Aruch was addressing when it was talking when we saw it in the laws of Shabbos, when it created that problem of doing this, of dividing items up using a lottery system. He says that's where you have people who are partners and they're trying to divide assets or trying to determine who's going to get the first piece. That's where we say that there may be a halachic problem because of a lack of reliance on the system. But in this kind of situation where everyone's buying a lottery ticket, that's not related, and therefore people are more lenient. He says, he brings another tshuva. He says, Ruvain buys a lottery ticket, and then Shimon gives him money because he wants to be a partner in Ruvain's lottery ticket. Let's see. So the halachic question is the giving of the money enough to create a binding commitment, such that if Reuven wins the lottery, he has to split the winnings with Shimon, who gave him money, or do they have to make an additional kinyan on top of that? So that's an additional tshuva. So he goes on for quite some time deliberating over this issue, whether engaging in a lottery constitutes a sense of false reliance or legitimate reliance on the winning of the lottery, in which case it would create a halachic problem because people who put forward their money only on a reliance in the lottery maybe are not giving it with a full heart. But in the end, he basically says that this is the minhag that people have to be lenient. I'll just conclude with this. when it comes to playing games in general or other forms of recreation, I know that someone came over to me in the parking lot and said, Rabbi, you're telling me I can't play golf? What we have to appreciate that we live in a much more luxurious world today where generally people have more recreational time. We have to remember that in the world in which people lived 2 or 3 generations ago, life was very gray and bleak, and there was an expectation that you were either spending your time working or you were spending your time doing mitzvahs and studying Torah. And so there was a general attitude that any free time that you had should not be spent doing things that are wasteful. And that's why the Rav Shulchan Aruch had said, even if you can justify that gambling is not considered to be gezel, but at the same time he said, Avol yeshbo iser esek b'dvarim b'telim, but you're engaging in wasteful activities. She'ein roi la'adam shiaso kol yamav ela b'divrei chachma u'miyushuvo shel olam. A person should spend his entire lifetime engaging either in the acquisition of wisdom or trying to be productive in making the world a better place. And anything, right, that's what b'yushuvo shel olam is, going to make a parnasa, right, to help put food on your table. So you should either spend your time putting food on the table and being productive, or spend your time acquiring wisdom. But to spend your time playing dice or spend your time playing games, the Rav Shulchan Aruch frowns on this activity, and it seems like the general consensus of the classic poskim is that this is not something that you should be spending your time on. I think that if I was a parent and my child were to ask me how can I best spend my time, I probably would tell them the same advice. But we all acknowledge that we occasionally need time to be able to come back to ourselves, which is why the Sefer Birkei Yosef writes that even when you see great rabbis playing a game of chess, it may be in order for them to alleviate their depression, their stress, and so forth. There are many people who lead stressful lives, and if they didn't have a release valve, a way of releasing some of that stress, it might affect their mental health. And so for those people who really feel that they need to do this to preserve their sanity, and they need to play golf in order to preserve their sanity, then this is something that is justifiable, just like playing chess. And also with the recognition that, everything that we do in life has to be for the service of Hashem. Whether we are eating, whether we are working, whether we are going to the bathroom or engaging in the most mundane activities, we always are supposed to have the attitude that everything that I do in life is as an Eved Hashem, as a servant of God, to fulfill my purpose in life. For many of us, the fact that we were born in the age that we were born is an indication that we are part of the general society. And because the general society engages in recreational activities so that we can have a sense of relief of stress and so forth, so this is the justification for us to engage in these activities. But a person should always have in mind that I'm exercising so to be a better Eved Hashem. I am watching Netflix to be a better Eved Hashem. I am engaged, I'm playing golf to be a better Eved Hashem. And if you can make that argument to yourself that this will help me because I need to blow off some steam, or I need to get my mind off of work, or I need to get my mind off of whatever is bothering me, and you do this and you can accomplish this by engaging in recreational activity, to become a better Eved Hashem, so then that's the justification. But that ultimately should be why we do anything that we do in life. So, okay, I think we'll leave that discussion here for now. Okay, so let me wish you all a good